The goal at Bare Butt is for us to become the largest company in the whole entire world in the outdoor industry, and this vlog is going to show you from day one of us trying to achieve that all the way until we do, so come watch the journey.
A while ago, I decided to replace my backpack.
Many months later.
Robert gets right to the point and says, updates on backpacks. That brings us to now. As of making the video in November 2019, over a year since I signed up for Kickstarter, I will never get a backpack from Bare Butt because they filed for bankruptcy earlier this year. So that brings me to part 3. I actually reached out to people who worked at Bare Butt and asked them questions. And I'm going to keep them anonymous because I know some of them still know people who do work at Bare Butt. But a lot of the people who answered these questions had left the company when they answered my questions. I reached out to several people via Instagram at first because that was the only way I knew how to find them. And then the people that did agree to answer my questions, I asked everyone 2 questions that were the same. And then the third question that I asked was different from the rest. So you'll see kind of the first 2 questions will be the same on each person, and then the third one will be tailored specifically to that person's experiences and position at the company. So here's an example of the questions that I asked everyone. I asked everyone what their job title was. I asked everyone what their favorite part about Bare Butt was. And I did ask everyone what is one thing you would do different if you could go back. And then this third question was tailored, like I just mentioned. The first person that answered me was the product development engineer, and he worked there for 9 months. His favorite part about Bare Butt was the people. When he started, it was a very small, tightly knit group, and everyone was fun to work with. And he also said his department was close knit and became good friends. The one thing he would do differently, he answered this question that he said, I don't know that I would change anything about my role, but he said he could have tried to voice his opinions more when he had questions or doubts about some of the decisions being made. But the leadership of the company had a very strong vision of what they wanted, and I don't know that I would have been able to sway them. So keep in mind that his favorite part was the people, and the thing he would do differently is speak his opinion. As he says here in the third question that I asked, did you foresee bankruptcy as a possibility? And he says that he did understand it was a startup, and there was a possibility that it would fail, but when he joined, it was the peak, and it would take months and a number of financial missteps before we started to see the writing on the wall. I like his attitude here at the end of his email. He said, ultimately, Bare Butt was a hammock startup that was created by great guys who didn't have much business experience. A lot of people ended up leaving disappointed, but we also left with some great memories and a lot of lessons learned. This is a very refreshing attitude to see from people involved in this situation, especially compared to a lot of the screenshots I showed you in part 2. This next person answered me on Instagram. I asked them what their favorite part of working at Bare Butt was, and they said the environment. They wanted to work hard. They were hustling. They felt like what they were doing was making a difference, and what you said did influence more than what you would expect from working at another company. But then the one thing they would do differently is speak their mind. There were things at Bare Butt that, like any company, they admit, were not handled right or handled correctly. This was essentially what led to their downfall, but their family member and them both worked there, and they wish they would have expressed their opinions about business models and other decisions more. They believe that this would have stopped things from going south and leave both of them unemployed when they let everyone go. And I asked this person for their third question how long they worked at Bare Butt. They worked there 5.5 months. They figured everything was going south in January, and they let everyone go at the middle or end of February. Now, remember when I backed the Kickstarter, the beginning of February, and then it turns out a few weeks later, everybody was laid off. This was surprising to me when I read it because the vlog started in either late December or early January, and we didn't find out about layoffs until March. And so the best way that I know how to explain this is with a drawing, and I'll try to draw it out clearly for you. Kind of like this. They would film the vlogs up to here, then they began releasing them in January, and the people got laid off in the middle of the vlog releases. So kind of interesting if you ask me, but let's look at what more people had to say. This next bit here is a little interesting. It is actually a blog post from a girl who worked at Bare Butt, and she talks about how she got fired on a Monday. And she doesn't name Bare Butt, but when she says that she talked to the CEO and the COO, that's how Bare Butt handled their layoffs. And I just highlighted it here. It didn't make financial sense for the startup to keep me. And so she goes on to talk about, in this short blog post, her reactions to being laid off. And she handles it very well. She has a great attitude in this story. But this highlighted part is very interesting to me because she says, he, the owner of the company, recruited me. He took me away from a perfectly good job with the promise of ownership and growth and opportunities and experience. He saw my potential and valued the skills I offered. Where did I go wrong? And obviously she didn't do anything wrong, but everyone has that question when their company goes out of business. What could I have done differently? And it's interesting to me that she says he recruited her specifically. Seeing how young everyone in these videos is makes me wonder how many of these people he also recruited specifically. This girl is wearing a BYU shirt in one of her public profile pictures, and so I'm 99% sure that he went to the campus and recruited people to work for him at Bare Butt. She ends her blog on a positive note, and she says, take advantage of the opportunities when they come to you and smile, and it's okay to be broken or weak. So she obviously learned what she needed to from the experience and moved on. This person's job at Bare Butt was designer, and they worked there about 4 months. This was conveyed to me in an Instagram message before they replied to my emails. I apologize for all the text on the screen. I will walk you through the highlights here. Their favorite thing about Bare Butt was their coworkers. They kept things fun and entertaining, and when Bare Butt was going down the drain, it was much easier dealing with it as a group. One thing that they would have done differently is they say that they would have spoken up a lot sooner about how moronic the business plan was. He said they were asked to meet impossible deadlines, and I wish I had stood up for myself and my team members a little bit harder. The owners made me feel like my doubt was a lack of support for the company, and so I felt like I had to keep silent. Management was spreading the business out way too thin by pursuing multiple products, and I wish I'd have been the one to help pull the plug on certain projects early on until we were ready to handle them. So I thought this person had a good attitude, and I asked them if someone came to you and they were considering accepting an offer with a startup in a position similar to yours, what is one piece of advice you could give them? They said there's nothing wrong with wanting to pursue some of your career goals. When this fashion designer position was offered, I felt like it was a huge opportunity and I jumped on it immediately. I learned a lot at Bare Butt, and the majority of those lessons taught me what not to do when starting a business. Startup companies require transparency, and that is not something Bare Butt did. They had their secrets and couldn't admit their faults. Everyone has to be on the same page. We can't be effective if we don't know what's going on. So then their advice is just to go ahead and try things and see what happens. But I really zeroed in on that idea of not having transparency with Bare Butt because I felt like we were seeing a lot of the company's doings on the vlogs and on Instagram. So I went back and asked this person some more questions. I asked them if they were blindsided by how poorly the company was performing, or if they had a feeling things were going poorly but didn't get the same message from leadership. And they said, they kind of combined their answer here. Absolutely. We were in really good condition when I started. I was blindsided by how poorly management was handling our finances and how fast we went from good to having to fire everyone. We were told everything was going to be okay as long as we kept working. They talked about how we were going through a rough patch. And then one day everything was fine. Then suddenly all of us were getting pay cuts. Then we had to let go of multiple seamstresses and ensured that we would be okay. And then we all ended up getting fired. So then I said, do you think the YouTube vlogs were transparent about the company's struggles? And they said, absolutely not. If people saw how destructive management was with our finances, no one would have supported the Kickstarter campaign. Literally, no one would have donated anything if they knew how much debt we had accrued within just a couple months. The vlog talked about the tip of the iceberg when it came to problems. It kept viewers entertained and distracted and helped make people feel like they were in the loop. But no one was in the loop. Not even my coworkers knew what was going on until it was far too late. Obviously, I was surprised by the way that this person answered these questions, and so when the next person replied to my emails and offered what they had to offer, I was even more surprised. I was very excited when this person replied to me because they claim to be the full-time videographer. They made the daily vlogs and they did other stuff too with social media. So their input and perspective to me would be very fascinating since they were kind of at the forefront of what I was consuming on a daily basis and other people were consuming as well. Once again, the favorite thing that he had about Barebutt was the culture. He said it was hopeful, laid back, fun, and trustworthy. They trusted us to get our stuff done and to do it well. The people were fun to work with. The work felt satisfying. The one thing he would do differently, however, is that he would be more vocal about his opinions. There were some calls that they made that he was against, but he felt like they knew more than him, and not sure if they would have listened to him, though, because he had little to no experience in business himself. So he's very honest about his opinions and how he doesn't have business experience, but he also says, like everyone we've seen so far, that he would have tried to be more vocal about the problems that he saw. This person had such a unique perspective, so I asked them how much of a role did the vlogs and social media play in the day-to-day operations of the company. They said they did nothing but damage to the company. The vlogs didn't pull any income, and the money they spent on him wasn't worth what they got back in return. If he were them, he would have focused on Instagram growth and Facebook growth. Starting a YouTube page is incredibly hard if you're not recognized enough, especially if you're going to rely on it for income, as he's saying they were. What's interesting to me is he says it could have been done and it could still be done. They just need to learn from the mistakes that were made and redo it. If they had financial plans that weren't just rely on God, there would have been a world of difference. So it's very curious to me that he words it that way, because it seems like they were praying and hoping for miracles all throughout the vlog. And here the videographer confirms that their business plan was largely just relying on provision from him. He loved his experience there, and he was super grateful for everything that they've done. They had a lot of fun times, and he just decided to leave. And that coincides with a comment I think I showed in the last part where they said that, the videographer had just quit instead of being fired. I would like to note that everyone that I talked to was in their 20s or early 30s, if that. So all very young people, fresh out of college or fresh off the mission field. And so it's easy when you're younger to get a little confused, to get a little timid, to get a little nervous. So I'm not faulting any of these people for not speaking up, but I wanted to point out that common theme. Now that guy you just saw on the screen, his name is Matthew. He is the Chief Financial Officer or Operations Officer, one of the two. And I emailed him directly at his Barebutt email, and he replied to me. I asked him the same 2 questions that I ask everyone else. And what was funny is when I reached out to him, I said, I was wondering if you could answer some questions about Barebutt. I'm making a mini doc on the rise and the fall of the company. And he replied back to me, said, sounds good, man. Hit us up with your questions. And he copied Michael on the email, which was funny to me because I had already emailed Michael the same thing and gotten responses from him. And then when I asked Matthew these questions, I sent the first 2 of the same questions as everyone else. And then the third one, I said, how would you respond to someone if they accused you of being responsible for the decline of Barebutt? And he never replied to my email. Michael just said, sure, when I sent him the email asking if I could interview him. And I asked him the same thing. What was your favorite part? What's the thing you would do differently? His favorite parts were many, he says. From the early stages of figuring out our name to running the customer service with my wife. So that confirms everything that I showed you in the last part of the documentary, where it seemed like the customer service had the same communication as Sammy. And then to always struggling to have enough inventory to supply the demand, to the middle of growing a team and learning how to manage a large group of employees. His answer to what he would do differently, he says, these questions never make sense because the results are what get you to where you are now, and why would you ever change that? So obviously going out of business is not a deterrent to him. He would still have done everything the same up to this point in the progress of Barebutt. And then the third thing that I asked him that was unique to Michael was, what would you say to an entrepreneur who is looking to start their own business but faces the same obstacles that he did? And his answer is very simple: shut up about everything and start. I emailed him back a couple days later, said, thank you very much. Could you give me an update? And the Kickstart email said it didn't look good. He says Barebutt is currently going through a bankruptcy. Most likely the brand will continue to sell after some time off the internet. I recently noticed that they are selling hammocks again, just hammocks and straps. And so I believe that what he said is true. Now, the update that I received said Bare Butt Team version 2.0. And I don't know if that means that it's still Michael in place or if it's a different company, but you can see there at the bottom, V2 transition team. So Bare Butt is back on the internet. And something interesting that I noticed about Bare Butt are their ads and their Instagram stories. This girl is sitting here happy with her hammock, and it says at the top, the word Saturday has a word, quote, sat, close quote, in it. Make sure you take this day to sit and relax. And to me, that would be a curious way of marketing my product, and I would wonder if the person writing this ad spoke English as their primary language. So I'm not claiming that that's the case, but it would seem that maybe they've outsourced more than just their gear at this point in time. This next part I need to preface. I found this person on LinkedIn, and it's not the person pictured on the screen right now, but they replied to me on LinkedIn, and initially I thought they were a Bare Butt employee because I had found them linked through another page that Bare Butt was involved in, or on Facebook or something, but they corrected me, as you'll see in these screenshots. I was upfront from the beginning and said, I'm an aspiring filmmaker. I was wondering if I could email you some questions about your time at Bare Butt, because I still thought they had worked there. And then they said, yes, they were happy to help. What do you need from me? And then they agreed to just answer the questions on LinkedIn, and I sent them, what I was planning on doing. And so I sent them the two same questions I sent everyone, because at this time I still thought they worked at Bare Butt. So then she said that she was with an agency Bare Butt used after they let go all of their employees. We didn't know they were so on the way out. And then she says, are they out of business now? And with it came other struggles like lack of payments and stuff. So my perspective may be different than that of what you'll get from actual employees that were laid off. So then I informed her that they are declaring bankruptcy and then returning. So then I asked what they meant by lack of payments, and did they hire you to run social media? And she said, they paid us for the first month or two and then couldn't continue payments. At one point, the CEO struck a deal with a video crew and expected our agency to pay for it when the crew came asking for their money. The problem was there was no money to give them on our end because Bare Butt hadn't even paid this person's agency for that month. And so she tries to be positive here at the bottom. They had great intentions and were good guys, but they just seemed like they had major lack of experience. So let me recap that. The CEO of Bare Butt asked a video crew to make an ad and expected this outside agency to pay for the ad when he hadn't even paid the outside agency for the work that they had done for them that month. So then I said, how did they think your agency would foot the bill? Is that even a service your agency would offer? And she said the crew was supposed to shoot the product in Hawaii. It was something the CEO negotiated on his own, but it was content that I would use directly for social posts and other initiatives. With the other photographers we personally work with, we would set aside budget and foot the bill from monthly payments. But because this was something he decided to separate us and haven't even paid for the last 2 months, we had no budget to pull from. Last I heard, neither my old company or the film crew has ever been paid. So I was a little surprised to hear that he would just try to leverage another outside service to pay for a product that he was trying to purchase from a third party. But then I got this email chain that I'm about to show you, and everything got a lot clearer. I want to preface this by saying everything you're about to read is exactly as he said it, and it is not my personal opinion or assumptions. This is what he said as an employee of Bare Butt who was laid off. His position was CMO, which I think is Chief Management Officer, and he grew the company by millions of dollars year over year before quitting once he found out the lies, which is, like I said, what he said. So his favorite part was leading the overall revenue strategy. So a different favorite part from everyone else that we've seen so far. He was proud of what he was able to accomplish there personally. His only full year there before quitting, revenue increased over 700%, directly related to what I was able to do. The revenue absolutely exploded through my efforts, and I'm happy that I was able to lead that charge. So then I said, what is one thing you would do differently if you could go back? And he said, not trust Michael and Matthew. I was advised very early on, like 2017, remember all of this happened in 2018, to get out of there. I believed Matthew when he told me that making hammocks in our warehouse would cost about $11 each when they were asking me about what my decision was about moving the warehouse and manufacturing to ourselves. He claims to have ran the numbers on it all, and I believed him. Obviously, he was miles off. They ended up costing around $80 each, and we sold them for $35. Ha ha ha. What a joke. The finance department at Bare Butt was so amateur it wasn't even funny. The head of all finances didn't have any work experience or schooling on it. He was brought in directly from being a security guard at BYU. So this guy that I watched in the vlogs and that you've seen so far that was talking about all these financial things and the way that they needed to raise money and the different terms and net terms that they needed to get, he was a security guard working for Brigham Young University and then came in and became the chief financial officer at Barebutt, according to this email that I have from this former employee. So that was a little bit interesting to me, but then he said something else that really caught me off guard. I asked if he'd been able to take his experience at Barebutt and used it to impact his future, and he said yes. He's built a couple companies, and he's been doing the exact opposite of Barebutt when it comes to finances, operations, and ethics. I knew too much, and that was what led me to quit before everyone else. The dishonesty and manipulation was crazy there, and now I have a strong focus on honesty and talent when I work with vendors. And then he said he would be happy to discuss this more and I edited this person's name out because they did not reply to any of my Instagram DMs and they did not wish to be involved in the documentary, but this person and him were the only two that knew the most. They were part of the board that consisted of Michael, Sammy's wife, Matthew, myself, and the third party here. They knew things like using inventory as equity for multiple loans, which he says was the breaking point for him, and photoshopping contracts to manipulate suppliers, which was a breaking point for the other person. It was bad. Now, I need you to understand that these two men that you've seen on the screen so far throughout this documentary were supposedly photoshopping contracts to lie to suppliers and using their own inventory as equity for multiple loans. So not just one loan. That would be enough of a stretch already, but using it for multiple loans, which is, if in fact it is true, is illegal for someone to do with a company. I asked him if the open pay policy was a thing, or if they really just said it in the vlogs, and he said it really was a thing. He doesn't think it was necessarily a horrible thing. It could help make sure there was a pay gap, but he also had one of the highest salaries in the company. And if you're wondering where I got the idea that they had an open pay policy, it's from this video.
Okay.
You really did,
Can you tell us a little bit about your open pay policy?
Yes, here at Barebutt, we like everyone to know where everyone's at. And so we have a policy where everyone can see anyone's salary at any time for any reason. The idea behind it is if someone else wants to make more money, they can see, hey, I want to go in that position because that makes more money, and they can work their way towards it. Also, we really hate drama and people talking smack, and what happens is everyone in the company wants to know what everyone makes, and so they kind of just whisper behind everyone's back, and then they all figure it out. So we just flipped that, reversed it, and said, hey, everyone, this is what everyone makes. Stop being weird culture people. It's okay. We all make about the same amount of money. No one cares. Yada, yada, yada. So that's our policy.
So that was kind of a shock to me. And then this next question that I asked him was about China and where Total Pack and all these things that you'll see in part 4 of the documentary. That brings us to the end of part 3. So be sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below with what you thought about the claims that one employee made about photoshopping documents. And I will see you guys in part 4 coming up, where we'll talk more about this guy, Michael, and what he did throughout the run of Barebutt. See you then.